Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. It happens to all of us. You pick up the Virginian-Pilot, you read an editorial, and you wonder on exactly what planet the pilot is living. And there's no name on the editorial, so you can't really focus your wonder about how these people manage to get up and get to work in the morning. Well, tonight we're going to draw the curtain back on the whole editorial process. You've seen Don Lozado lots of times on this broadcast, and as a member of our editorial roundtable, we've often referred to the editorial board. Well, tonight we thought it would be interesting to talk about how the pilot comes to decisions about its editorial stances on the issues and the ways in which those positions get more comments online. So joining us tonight, Don Lozado from the editorial page of the Virginian-Pilot. He is the editor there. And Sean Day, who is one of the newest members of the editorial team. He is the one who handles much of the online conversation about the editorial team's efforts, or as we like to call it, the Wild, Wild West. Nice to have both of you with us tonight. Thank you for being here. I trust you don't mind I poked a little fun at the top of the show, because
I'm not sure it's wonder. I think it's rage, at least part of the time.
People do tend to get a little worked up about some of the positions that the pilot takes. I wonder.
Well, and they sometimes get revved up about positions they think we've taken. And so it's a wide mix of reactions that we get. So we're just glad people are reading.
Exactly. It's a beautiful thing. So I thought we might talk tonight about, first of all, the difference between the editorial department and the news department. Sure. I think those of us in the business understand that pretty well, but I've come increasingly to believe that there is a general misunderstanding about that, about where those lines are drawn. So the news department those are the folks who are presenting all sides of the story, not taking an opinion, fact-based. Right,
they're on a different floor from us. They're on the second floor. We're on the fourth floor at Brambleton, and they communicate the news as fairly and completely as they can. What we do is we comment on that news. We do a lot of our own reporting. We do a lot of our own talking. It really is a group effort. It's not just one person's opinion.
So you might talk to the reporter who covered the story upon which you're commenting. You don't?
Very rarely do we do that. I mean, that's just sort of that's the wall through which we don't go.
But if you wanted more details, you'd do your own research and try to figure that out.
Yeah, of course. We'd call our own sources. We'd call our own, the people that we know. Now, we're in the same building. We've worked with these people for a lot of years. So it's not as if we don't know who the reporters are.
Sure.
But it's
you really work hard to keep that.
Yeah, we have to. I mean, part of our mission is to bring our own reporting to what we do. Now, we sometimes base a lot of what we write on stories that are in the newspaper, but
so
does
when we
everyone
talk
else.
About the editorial board, who are we talking about?
There are 5 of us. There are 6 of us, including the publisher, and it's a group of us that sit in a room usually a couple times a week, and we go over what we're going to write about, what we're thinking about various issues.
So everybody just brings ideas in?
Yep.
Is that how it works?
Yep, and we sort of go around the table and we pitch ideas off our beats. We all have beats. I covered Norfolk and Suffolk and some environmental stuff. Sean covers Chesapeake. And a variety of other issues that he's taken an interest in. And we just we go at it. And we talk about it, and sometimes we argue, and sometimes we agree.
Is there disagreement within that board?
Yeah. Sean's the newest member. He probably brings the newest perspective.
Sean was at the Daily Press previously, right?
Before I joined the editorial board, I was working in the Virginia Beach Bureau.
In the Virginia Beach Bureau, got it.
Pilot, right.
And so you are the newest member, or one of the newest members? You're probably the newest, aren't you?
Newest member of the board.
Yeah. And so you have a particular interest in what? What do you typically cover?
Well, I cover the city of Chesapeake, and I also write about immigration issues, some other national affairs, education also.
I see. So did you choose that, or did they choose it for you?
Well, it was kind of a discussion. I mean, we talked about it when I first joined the board, and everybody already kind of had a lot of issues that they covered, and then we just kind of sorted them out.
So people do disagree from time to time within that group. So it's a sort of a robust debating society, I guess, to some extent. And it must be very interesting, because I know you're all smart people. It must be a really interesting meeting to sit through.
Well, I think the disagreement's important. I mean, for example, we have some fairly passionate disagreements about abortion, for example. There's a myriad of opinions on that board. We have disagreements about immigration. We have disagreements about environmental policy. It is very and I think the great benefit of having a variety of opinions on the board is that the ideas that we end up with get tested at that table. And we go out of our way to test them in the community as well. We talk to people who disagree with us to sort of to see whether they survive that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So on these issues about which there is disagreement, how do you, because your editorials are sort of written with one voice, so how do you, if there's fundamental disagreement on an issue, then do you just not write an editorial about that subject until everybody gets on the same page? How do you do that?
There are some issues that we haven't been able to agree on, and so if the board is that divided, it probably means something. And so we have in some cases not written about something. That's really interesting. Sometimes a subject just simply doesn't lend itself to commentary. It's it's so clear what's going on there that there aren't really a difference of opinion.
I'll give you fair warning now. I'm going to ask each of you in just a moment, so you have time to think about it. About some of the editorials that have struck you one way or the other, either something you really liked that you did, something you really didn't like, something that got a lot of comment, that sort of thing. But I will give you fair warnings. That's coming. That's sort of like the test prep. They know that that one is going to be coming. So Sean, what was interesting to you about becoming part of an editorial team as opposed to being in a reporting staff?
I really enjoyed the discussion that the board goes through in terms of trying to reach a conclusion, trying to reach a solution, and so there's a lot of give and take. And I kind of like that. The time that you get to spend analyzing an issue and coming at it from different directions and ultimately reaching a solution that everyone can pretty much agree with, this is going to be your best solution.
This is how we feel about it.
Yeah.
And you manage a lot of the online commentary. So this is where you would have an editorial that posts on your website, and boy, a lot of people like to comment.
They do. A lot of people do like to comment. It has changed a little bit in terms of the content of the comments since we switched to a verified user commenting system.
Let's talk a minute about that. What is that? So before, anybody could say, within certain bounds, anyone could say anything and you wouldn't necessarily know who they were. Is that fair enough? Yeah.
Right. There was no accountability in terms of the comments. Anyone could post under whatever name they wanted to post under.
Yeah.
With the switch to verified commenting, the commenters are required to post messages under their real names.
Wow.
And so it lends a little bit more accountability.
How do you know they're the real names? I mean, what process do
we
you
have? We have a verification process in which the reader can actually self-verify their identity. So they run a credit card authorization through PayPal. It's a no fee, no charge, just a quick enter of their credit card number, and it is processed through PayPal, and it confirms their identity.
Because you would have to do that when you set up a relationship with a credit card company or I got it.
Right,
So that would be the way of verifying who you are. What has that done to the nature and tone of the comment on the pages?
Well, it's been pretty dramatic in terms of how it's lifted the quality of the conversation. It's been much more measured, it's been much more thoughtful and deliberative. There have been far fewer personal attacks, far fewer violations of our terms of service.
Yeah. It probably
few.
makes it easier, I would imagine, for you to do your job, because in some respects it causes them to self-police. It causes people to self-police before they post, so that you don't have to do so much in the moderating.
When you're going to post something with your name on it, you tend to think about it a little bit more than you're going to attach to it.
But it's funny. I would argue that probably the larger goal was just sort of to improve the deliberative nature of the commenting, and really where people comment the most is in letters to the editor.
Yeah.
Which has always had that standard. You have to use your name and your hometown on them. And so what we've done is really sort of changed the dynamic so that everybody has to meet that same standard.
You kind of brought the same standards to online world that you have in the print world.
And we're one of, I'm not sure that many other newspapers, if any, have done this. And so it's...
I know you and I have talked a lot about that over the years, and we sort of both thought that probably would have that effect of elevating the conversation. Because as you say, Sean, it's, when you have to autograph what you do, it somehow makes you look at it a little bit differently. Because it has been described as the Wild Wild West, and I love that terminology because it's pretty accurate, I think, in terms of where we are with the whole world of online commentary. So have other newspapers been in touch with the pilot about this process and how it works for you?
Enough to know that some are watching it to see what
Really?
the results, see how this shakes out. I mean, it's an incremental process. I mean, what I've been really fascinated by is that we've had signups that have progressed almost daily. Rarely a day goes by without somebody signing up to become a verified commenter. So even after there was an initial rush,
yeah,
but it continues. It's sort of slow and steady, and I'm encouraged by that.
And so as you think about some of them, we'll come back to my question I warned you about. As you think of maybe recently some of the editorials that have really struck you for one reason or the other, maybe you really liked what the paper said and maybe you didn't, or maybe there's a lot of comment. What is one that comes to mind?
I think I think one of the issues that I'm most encouraged by is the lingering debate about offshore drilling. It's an issue that's of incredible importance here because of Virginia Beach, because we all spend our time near and on the water, and people are really passionately engaged over this subject. And the editorial board has spent a great deal of time and effort and words and ink and on it over the years. A lot of people don't agree with us, but a lot of people do.
And what is the pilot's position on offshore drilling?
We've gotten to the point now where we're pretty much opposed to it with very few exceptions. I think there's a way that it could be crafted that we'd get there. Mm-hmm. But right now, this table is sort of shaped like the map off the coast of Virginia, and so
we did it that way purposely.
Yeah, I know.
I'm kidding. Not
so
that.
Virginia gets a very, very small share of its offshore territory, but all the risk. So it takes all the risk for drilling, but has very, very few of the benefits, and it's just a bad deal from a Virginian's perspective.
And so have you gotten a lot of comment on that one? You said there was a lot of passionate debate about that.
It's funny, on that one point, people tend not to really want to engage, because I think it's sort of beyond.
Is it one of those issues that you sort of know where you're going to be on that, and nobody's really going to change their mind on it?
It is. Some people just think we need to do everything we can to get every ounce of oil we can off our coast, and I think that's a legitimate perspective. Our disagreement with that has been really, it's just a lousy deal as it's currently constructed for Virginians, and so
as you think about putting that editorial together, you don't sign editorials. I mean, you kind of come to that collectively, and somebody writes it, right? Sure. Does that duty kind of shift around the team, or how do you figure out who writes it, and why don't you sign them?
Why don't we sign them? Because it's not my opinion.
So that would focus the attention on you instead of
It's the opinion of the editorial board, the institution of the pilot, rather than the newsroom or the publisher or anything else. It really is sort of a collective effort.
And so who writes them?
It depends. It's one member of the board, and it depends on the subject. And that, in the case of that, it was me. I don't think that'll be any secret. I've written an awful lot about offshore drilling over the years, but it's certainly not my opinion alone. I mean, and it's been a very consistent opinion of the pilot through years and multiple editorial boards.
And Sean, how about you? Is there an editorial that you have been involved in or engaged in that's been particularly striking for you?
I would say that I've been interested a lot in higher education, right? And what's going to happen in terms of the state budget, the crafting of the budget.
Yes.
And that's something that we've all kind of worked on together about different state budget related issues and expenditures and things that would be cut and things that might actually make it through. So it's been interesting on multiple levels there to kind of watch each of those come through the process, and for us to have the discussion and then to see what feedback is from the readers.
I think transportation is an interesting example, because that's really a subject that we've all written about, depending almost on where you're talking about. I mean, different people have focused on statewide issues. We've focused on local roads, and so we've individually written about it from our city's perspectives.
And each of you then has a column as well, right? I mean, well, I shouldn't say column, but each of you writes a piece once in a while that does carry your byline your name. Because I know when you said transportation, I was reminded of the piece you wrote about how marvelous the roads are in Richmond.
Yes.
And you were a little cranky about it.
I was.
Yeah.
I was, and I was taken to task for it by folks from Richmond, folks from Hampton Roads, folks from all over the place. Yeah, sure.
And so what did they take you to task for? Because I thought what you wrote was accurate.
Well,
maybe a little bit, maybe expressed with some hyperbole.
Yeah, a little bit.
You know, it is true that Richmond has better roads than we do.
It is true, and Richmonders do not like to have that pointed out because the implication is that they're getting special treatment from.
I appreciated what
government.
You said about the idea that in Richmond they sort of view it as the cost of the burden they bear to have the state government there. So if we've got to have the state government, really, at least we could have some good roads.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's worth it, but.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So the other area where editorial boards become important is during election season. You are the ones who sit down and talk with all these candidates as they come through.
Yes.
How does that work? Does the candidate call you and say, "Hey, we'd like to come and talk to you," or do you extend the invitation to them and say, "We're going to try to talk to as many of these folks as we can"?
We extend the invitation to everyone. We try to talk to every candidate for every race, and it's you're right. It's an important part of what we do. It's something that we take extraordinarily seriously.
And do you ask the same questions of all of the candidates, or is it a more wide-ranging conversation than that?
We do both. We do both. I mean, I think
because some candidates you would have to ask questions that were specific to a particular district, right? Yeah.
I mean, I think you went through.
We had a series of questions for each candidate in certain races, right? So each person who's running for one particular seat or office, we had similar questions that we would ask each of them, and then we also had candidate-specific questions that we needed to elaborate on and find out more.
I always think, and you would never do this, and I understand exactly why. I really appreciate that, but I think it would be fascinating to videotape that process and put it on. I do. I just think, it's a wide-ranging conversation with a bunch of different people sitting around the table. Having said that, if I were a candidate, that would just scare me to death. But by the same token, I think it would be an interesting exercise. But you would never do that, would you?
Well, there's a balance between getting people on the record and there's some things that people would be uncomfortable saying in front of a camera, frankly.
And do they say those things then in the privacy of the editorial board? I mean, are they pretty unpacked in there?
It depends on the candidate.
On the individual.
I mean, we've seen candidates who come in and they're as guarded there as they are anywhere else, and
so
some
what
who
happens
aren't.
After you publish? Do you have a policy around when you publish these? What endorsements you do and when you do them? Is there anything around the timing of that?
We try not to step on the election. I mean, we're not going to. We don't, generally speaking, endorse right before an election. We try to back it out 10 or 12 days, give people a chance to respond and discuss.
Sure. And then do you hear from them on the other side of that, the candidates? What a silly question.
Yeah, we
you do.
Yes, we do.
Do you ever change your mind? I mean, I wonder about that. Does an editorial board ever have an issue where they said, you know what, we were this way all of this time, and new evidence has come to light, or, we've awakened from the fog, as some people probably would believe, and now we think a different thing. Can you think of an issue over which you have changed the general opinion of the paper?
As in, would we go back in time to have changed our...
Or just to say, we thought this for a long time, and now we think this.
Well, I can't think of an instance where I think to myself that I wish that we could go back and change it, because we made the best decision that we could
in the moment
with the information that we had.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Mayor Jim Hawley, we endorsed him for re-election, and then
that's right.
and then called for his recall. But
but that was because there was a series.
Sure, but there are opinions you wish you had back, and there are opinions that change over time as conditions change.
Any others that you can think of right off the bat?
I think, I don't think our position on light rail in Norfolk has changed, but our emphasis has a bit changed. I mean, I think you saw that in the editorial that ran Sunday. I mean, it's important for Norfolk to make light rail work for Norfolk.
I thought that was a really interesting and great point that I had not really thought about previously, is the idea that I think with light rail, you thought it was going to sort of go to Virginia Beach, and then maybe we would look at the Navy base and all the rest of it. But I thought that was a really interesting perspective about the idea that one way or the other, Norfolk has to make it work.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a difference in emphasis.
It's evolution.
It's an evolution of our position. I mean, we still are in favor of extending light rail, but I do think it's prudent to first make it work for Norfolk. Yeah. However that's going to happen, but I think Norfolk does need to make it work.
There's a great debate that I've seen take place in the editorial commentary section about whether the editorial board, the degree to which the editorial board should be a cheerleader for the region. I think there's some people who really feel that, collective you,
sure.
When you point up things that need attention and need work, that you aren't enough of a cheerleader for the region. And then there are other people who say, what are you talking about? That's not their role. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's part of our role. I mean, correct me here if you think this is wrong, but I think it's part of our role is to celebrate successes and go after villains and point out things that need to be different and solve problems. I mean, that's what we do. It's all of those things. But no, I don't.
Our role is not to sugarcoat stuff. So
yeah. I think
when something is legitimately deserves some sort of support and words of encouragement, we're happy to offer that, but we're not going to reach or try and dig something up that
I've always been surprised that people would think that was the role of the editorial board. But you wrote something.
I think we're supposed to be honest. I think we're supposed to be honest about what we think.
I love what you wrote. And it is your byline, so we know that you wrote Don Lozado. April 25th of last year. And I love this thing you did at the end of this piece where you said, the advantage of institutional longevity is that our principles aren't blown about by political winds, aren't influenced by the whims of any individual, including me. If we, the caretakers of this institution's traditions and histories, are doing our job, the ideals of the editorial board are no more subject to negotiation than are your own. And you talked about the institution of this newspaper when it comes to its editorial page. And it really has a brilliant history.
It does.
And a brilliant legacy.
It does. And I'm humbled to be part of it because it's, I walk in the door every morning, and the table that we sit in when we talk about editorials has the Pulitzer Prizes, the one for anti-lynching and the other against massive resistance on the walls. And these were incredible men who have held this seat before me, and it's a humbling chair to be sitting in, honestly.
But as you wrote, I thought it was very powerful what you wrote about this, that at the time that those opinions were written, which were awarded with the Pulitzer Prize, and which in retrospect I think most people say, well, of course it's as it should be, right?
Sure.
But at the time, that was an enormously courageous stance to take. I would say courageous, that is part of the word, but it really was a stance that was absolutely, for the most part, outside of the norm for the times.
It was at odds with. I'd argue it was at odds with at least part of our readership. I don't know what our readers believed at those times. I would hesitate to guess, but I think that given the reaction that I have seen, it was at odds with at least a vocal minority or even a majority of our readers. And for them to have taken the positions they took was courageous. I mean, I think there's no other word
Absolutely.
for it.
Particularly the massive, well, I mean, both of them really, but because massive resistance is certainly much more recent in our history, but if you think about the idea that the state government was arrayed up in opposition, many folks in the local community were arrayed in opposition, it really makes you wonder. It really makes you appreciate that courage. Don Lozado, thank you for being with us. Sean Day, thank you for being with us as well. Interesting look inside the editorial board. I'll be back in a moment with a final thought. Tonight we say farewell to one of our fairly regular contributors, our good friend Kimball Payne, who has been part of this broadcast since our debut 4 years ago, is leaving the Daily Press, where he's covered the General Assembly for many years. It is a tremendous loss for us. I know there are members of his fan club that will be sad about this. He has a big old fan club as a subset of this broadcast's audience. Kimball's insights into the intrigue that is politics in the Commonwealth gave us an inside look at the workings of our legislative process and the personalities who guide it. And while some told me they just wanted to take a brush to it, most of you just loved his hair. Now, if you're a regular to this broadcast, you will recall that Kimball got married last May. Reagan's family is here in Hampton Roads, and it's here they've decided to stay, fortunately for us. But Kimball is determined that as much as he loves reporting, he didn't want to be an editor, so he started looking around last fall for a career that would allow him to have a more regular schedule that would be conducive to family life. So he'll take those great skills of breaking down complex issues and building relationships and put them to work in the finance industry, where for the first time, he has an entirely clean-shaven face. I can't wait to see that. He starts training this month, and if I know Kimball Payne, I'm pretty sure he'll bring that characteristic candor to his new profession as well. Maybe he'll make it to Wall Street, where you might agree we could use a little more candor. I'll miss Kimball on this set, and I know you will miss him in your homes, but it makes me happy to know he's staying in Hampton Roads, and I hope that he steps up to some form of leadership in this community because he has just the energy, honesty, and enthusiasm that will help shape his future and ours. Thanks, Kimball. Later tonight, right here on WHRO TV 15, it's Need to Know. Tonight's national broadcast features an update on some Hampton Roads residents struggling with the effects of Chinese drywall. So that's coming up tonight at 9:30, right here on WHRO. On the radio, I hope you'll join us for more talk. It's 89.5, noon to 1 weekdays. And for all of us here at What Matters, I'm Kathy Lewis. We'll see you again next time for another look at what matters.